Hello, my name is Richard Heenan, and this is my final budget report for EDU 528, Financing the Athletics and Activities Program. Okay, so looking at our budget for this particular program, I have done a tier system for each individual team within our athletics program, and with that tier system, we divided or allocated the funds depending on what tier level each team is in. So teams can be placed in one of three tiers, and their placement is determined by sport participation levels among the students, the revenue generated each year by the sport, and then public interest among the program in the community. Because even though that could reflect on the revenue, some sports don't even require you to pay a gate fee whenever you come in. So sometimes that's not reflected with the popularity of the sport in a community. So that all of that has been factored into each sport and what tier they fall into. So the three-tier system, in the top tier, tier one, we have boys and girls basketball and football, and 18% of the overall $100,000 budget has been allocated for funds to each of these sports, giving them each $6,000 apiece. In tier two, we have wrestling, baseball, boys and girls soccer, boys and girls track, and softball. 35% of the overall budget has been allocated to tier two, giving each team $5,000 for their budget or their wish list. And tier three, we have cheer, boys and girls volleyball, field hockey, and girls lacrosse. And we've allocated 15% of the total budget to tier three, giving each team or program $3,000 to come up with the items on their wish list or their annual needs. Overall, this adds up to 68% of our $100,000 budget, or $68,000, because we've allocated $32,000 specifically for the sole purpose of using it with officials for each of these programs. After going through and analyzing each of the line item budgets that each program has presented in the wish list discussion board, each tier has been broken down, and I've broken down the items on the list into uniforms, game and practice equipment or miscellaneous items, and then totaled up those costs for each program. Now, some of these programs put on there some annual needs, some 4-year rotation needs, and 5 to 10-year rotation needs. So for the purpose of this spreadsheet, we just use the annual and 4-year rotation needs in case that it was the 4th year they were coming up on needing uniforms, so we could allocate the funds and see what we would be lacking or what would be over. So like I said on the last slide, we had the top tier teams receiving $6,000 each. The second tier team, they got $5,000, and the third tier team, they each got $3,000. Depending on what was on the wish list, a lot of teams ended up putting some big ticket items, maybe goals, or a lot of equipment and uniforms or travel gear. And the best thing to do whenever we approach this situation is we take the funds that have been allocated, and if 60% of your funds are going to go toward uniforms, then we'd say, okay, you need to take 60% of what we've given you and put that toward uniforms, and then we'll figure out fundraising from there. So as you can see on the far right-hand side, we've calculated the allotted funds minus the total that each team has came up with on their wish list, and you can see which teams have come out in the negative and they're going to need to be fundraising, and which teams have actually come out in the positive, and those funds have the choice for the team to use those on something else they might not have put on the wish list, or they can roll those funds over for next year if they need to get a big ticket item. Just for an example, the soccer team for boys had a positive account balance after they got their wish list items, so maybe next year they're going to use whatever money has rolled over and they can buy brand new goals or nets or anything like that. This concludes my final budget report. Thank you.